going to move quickly to things that require a vote because we're going to lose Senator Hancock. The problem is that Cesar's running about 15 minutes late, so it's going to look chaotic because it is. So bear with us. Okay, we're going to try to move through the action items that we can as soon as we can. And then there's some issues that are still up in the air that I don't know if they've been resolved between the members or not. So anyhow, just Happy New Year. It's our first hearing of the year. So I hope everybody's doing well so far. We'll get back to you. Talk amongst yourselves.
We're going straight to excellence, and Barb and I just sit here then? Sure.
Man, Michael, you're coming up already?
It's gonna go fast, right?
Trouble starting already? Oh, Lord. So, Michael, is your family still running that restaurant? Or people you know or partners?
Partner.
So there was a guy who,
The public testimony.
kind of a tall guy, thin,
Wait, he's not part of it.
maitre d', runs everything there.
Yeah.
Hey, Barb.
Front manager kind of guy.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't think
It's a quorum, and we'll move into the items as we spoke. So, thank you.
Okay, let's get started. We have 6 items to report tonight. So the
Thank
first
you.
item we wanted to share is that we actually have an open period or open round for the 30-day priority of funding. Again, folks have, the round just started in February 9th and ends February 7th. All those projects that are actually on the unfunded approval list and those projects being approved in consent agenda tonight do have the ability to participate. So those folks are encouraged to submit that funding certification request by February 7th. And the prior certifications actually did expire on January 8th. The next item we want to share is the release of the funds of the projects that were awarded in December. The board actually did take action of moving $383 million for 196 projects. And we received requests for over $111 million as of the middle of the month. And so we're making progression in that area. So I think we will probably achieve our goals by March 12th. And a reminder to those folks that haven't submitted the certification items, or excuse me, the fund release request, they have until March 12th to provide all the corresponding documentation and the request to our office. Another item is the overcrowded relief grant. We actually are presenting 22 applications, so we actually had a good rush of projects that are being processed this month, and that represents over $110 million in the consent agenda. And those are the projects that wrapped up in the 10th cycle. So we will have about $112 million in bond authority still left for the 11th cycle. And the 11th cycle is currently open, and that expires at the end of the month, January 31st. So those folks who are interested in the program and has questions, please seek out staff. We would be more than happy to help you out. The fourth item we wanted to share is the bottom on page 17 is the governor's proposed budget. There actually is a proposed reduction to the program for the 13-14 budget year. That would equate to 20 positions being reduced from our program for about $1.6 million. And so just wanted to share that with the members. There's 2 more items. The labor compliance program regulations are in effect, and as of December 31st, 2012, the emergency regulations did move forward, and those are, it just provides an opportunity for those projects that were awarded Proposition 47 and 55 funds. The board adopted regulations to clarify that if you didn't have a labor compliance program in place, and then you have a compliance program in place after the contracts were signed, there is an avenue to get written verification that you took the steps to initiate the program. So those regulations are in effect. The last item we wanted to share is we are introducing this month in the information section the true list of applications that are received beyond the bond authority. So that is all I have to share tonight.
Thank you. Why don't we then jump up to tab 5, which is the financial reports, since everything before that requires a vote.
Okay. On tab 5, let's just cut to the chase. We wanted to highlight on page 164, we actually did move $26.1 million.
Okay, hold that thought. If you call the roll, please, Ms. Jones.
Certainly. Senator Hancock. Senator Wyland. Assemblymember Buchanan. Assemblymember Hagman. Esteban Almanza.
Here.
Kathleen Moore. Cesar Diaz.
Here.
Pedro Reyes.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes. You have the minutes before you for the December 12th meeting. Is there any questions or comments? Any comments from the public? Is there a motion of approval? So moved. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, I have it. Thank you. We did the officer report. We have the consent. Yes, sir?
I do have a question back in the, probably more uniquely microphone.
Answer about the cutbacks in the governor's budget for this program. Understand this is not general fund used for the staff for this program. It's the bond funds, right? Certain percentage. I just don't know how much less work we're going to have this next year than we're going to have the previous year. So I'm just wondering if that, you believe that's going to be holding or not for that sizable staff reductions. I mean, as it is, we don't catch all the errors sooner. We end up seeing them on the appeal, so.
When we look at the positions, we actually do a workload study sort of thing. We do the analysis to make sure that the workload that's projected can be covered with the existing staff. But there is a reduction of work since there's less money and the process of the applications that are coming in are reduced. And so this is just a reflection, and the money that gets freed up is therefore available for projects to get out. So our interest is not to tie up a large chunk of money in administration when in fact there's a need out there that we can get to. So that's kind of where the genesis of that is.
So would it be possible at the next board meeting just to give us a little bit more in-depth summary or report in terms of where you see the workload changing and where we're reducing staff?
Sure, and the majority of the positions that were reduced, they were actually vacant positions.
Okay.
So it's looking at positions being there, position authority that have not been filled.
Right.
And they're not been filled because we've envisioned the workload going, that doesn't make
That's
sense
right,
to.
yeah.
And so it's just an administrative function, but we can have somebody from the education unit come up and talk to the issue, since it's more of a budget issue than a policy issue.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So make sure we put that in the agenda, and Ian, are you in the room? Are you hearing? There he is. Now you know your assignment. Early budget testimony. Okay. Moving on to then tab 4, the consent agenda. There's a document on your desk that because the regulatory amendment to item 10 is a conforming item based on the board direction of the October meeting, I'd like to suggest that we take it as part of the consent calendar since it's just a administrative issue. But there are a couple minor corrections in the subsection reference. And so I just want to make sure they acknowledge those corrections to subdivision C and subdivision D on C2. And they're just a cross-reference issue. It's not substantive change, it's just looking at the right section.
So, Mr. Chair, but I just have a question about the, I guess, the next item, number 11. How can that be on the consent, annual adjustments, SFP grants, and we still have to do the policy on number 11? So I don't know if that should be taken off and just added to with number 11, or?
Is item 11, go on.
So if you're referring to the consent item that we have, that is just to change the annual grants as approved by the board last year, which is prospectively for any project that we approve. The item that's on tab 11 addresses what we do with the projects that were already on unfunded list.
So moved.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there a second? Second. Ms. Buchanan has been seconded. Any questions, additional comments from them? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. 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 Oppose? Abstentions? I have it. Thank you. The next item is election of the chair.
There, correct.
Move Pedro as chair.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Thank you. Any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not from the board, not from the public, but the members. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. The vice chair.
I'll move Joan as vice chair. Ms. Buchanan.
Just,
Senator Hancock.
thank you. Seeing as how we don't have two members of the Senate here, and we actually have a vacancy, and I know there's a vacancy on the Assembly side too, I would just like to, as a courtesy, hold this off until we have a full complement of members, and hopefully before the next meeting, we'll be able to talk and discuss issues and come back with a legislative nominee.
Okay, the maker of the motion?
I don't see any of the three new members who have not been on the board yet stepping into that vice chair role at this point. And so they could add on or whatever, but I don't see them taking a leadership role as vice chair.
Okay.
So I'd rather just go ahead and get it done.
Ms. Buchanan.
I sort of find myself in an awkward position here in terms of, one, wanting to respect the wishes of you, Senator Hancock, and also believing that we've been without a vice chair for a number of months here, and we're looking at setting agendas as we move forward where, we may have some meetings or we may postpone other meetings depending on what the workload is and what we're doing. And so, I don't know where their members are because I don't want to look self-serving or anything else, but I do think at some point in time we need to move forward. I mean, I think we need a vice chair, and I think we need someone who's at all the meetings and that allows us to move forward. When we spent a little over a year ago, 2 years ago, we spent a great deal of time going in depth and had a number of meetings on terms of what we wanted the vice chair to who we wanted to be. We wanted to be a member from the legislature and what those responsibilities were. And one of them was to, have the vice chair work closely with, in this case, Bill, in terms of meeting the needs of the legislators. And I think there was a little bit of a gap there, given everyone's schedules and what they were doing in the last year or so. But we wanted the position to be an active position. So I do think that we need to move forward as expeditiously as we can. If people want to delay, I can respect that. But there's a reason we went through that long process that took months, and I think we do need to act at some point in time. I think everyone deserves that, including the other members who are serving here. And I also do agree with Assemblyman Hagman. I doubt if one of the new appointees is going to end up being the chair of the committee.
And I don't know if it's traditional, but a lot of the committees we have, it goes from Senate to Assembly, Assembly to Senate, back and forth. So I assume that this is rotation. I don't think I ever, as the only Republican on this side, is ever going to be selected for it. So I think there's a default here. So I'll be happy to see it go forward today if that's the wish of the board. So
I would like to wait. I think it would be important for there to be a full complement of legislative members and for us to perhaps discuss among ourselves some of the issues we're going to be facing. People can do what they want. I'm not comfortable voting today.
Okay. Anybody else weighing in? Mr. Senator Wyland coming in.
Can I just
Ms.
ask?
Yes.
2 questions. We're going to talk about how many meetings we're having in one of our items later, but are we anticipating a February board?
No, we're not at this point. I don't have any items for February. Unless something happens that we need to meet, I don't have anything scheduled for February.
And do you as chair know, or do our legislators know when the vacant positions are going to be filled?
I do not know.
We don't know.
The rules are not going to meet until later.
I mean, as one member, would want to, would defer to the legislative members because it is a legislative member position. And if we have one legislator that would like to delay that, would like to honor that, not be voting against it.
Right.
Well, whatever you
Ms. Buchanan,
Senator Wyland.
Senator Wyland, you want to weigh in? Mr. Hackman has nominated Ms. Buchanan as the vice chair. Senator Hancock's asked that we delay.
I don't know which one of these is supposed to be.
The white
button.
the white button, the white button. There you go.
Yeah, I just got here. I was just saying to Lonnie, I understand her point about the new members, but it just strikes me that Joan has done a lot of work on this and is sort of a natural vice chair. How long is it for? What period of time is it for?
2 years.
2 years?
Your term.
Yeah, and it just seems to me a natural thing. With all respect to everyone who had to, wanted to wait for the new folks, it seems to me to make sense just to go ahead and.
Was that a second then?
That's a second.
Okay. Okay. So it's been moved in second. I know Senator Hancock would prefer to postpone. Any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. I think you probably want to do roll call.
Very good. Senator Hancock. Senator Wyland.
Aye.
Assemblymember Buchanan.
Aye.
Assemblymember Hagman.
Aye.
Esteban Almanza.
Aye.
Kathleen Moore.
Aye.
Cesar Diaz.
Aye.
Pedro Reyes.
I don't think you need my vote.
Then you're right. The motion passes.
Thank you. Congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
Next item is, walk me through, what do we need?
Alford.
ALVORD, please. Thank you. Mr. Wanabe, Reader's Digest version.
All right. Less than 3 minutes. So we are in the action items portion of the agenda, tab 9, stamp page 197. The purpose of this item is to request the board.
But financials don't require a vote, and so we're going to lose a senator in a minute, so go ahead.
The purpose of this item is to request the board find that material inaccuracy occurred, which resulted in a funding advantage for the ALVORD Unified School District. This item also requests the board levy the statutory interest and loss of self-certification penalties for material inaccuracies. An OPSC review of the pupil enrollment data reported by the district revealed that the district falsely certified the enrollment that was reported to OPSC for 8 academic years. As a result of the incorrectly reported enrollment, the district received a funding advantage in the amount of $14.1 million that was not supported by the enrollment projections. Based on our review, there are 3 issues for the board's consideration. The first is the material inaccuracy finding. The district falsely certified their enrollment projection certification forms on 8 different submittals, which allowed funding advantages for 6 projects listed on attachment B in your item. The board should also find that material inaccuracies have occurred for these projects. The second item is rescissions and reductions of the apportionments and the associated interest penalty. If the board finds the district's applications do have material inaccuracies, statute requires the district repay the funding received as a result of the false certification, which in this case are the apportionments not justified by the eligibility requested. Statute also requires the district to repay interest that would have been earned on this amount representing the funding advantage. Staff has calculated the interest from the date of each project's fund release to the date the board makes a material inaccuracy finding based on the statutes and regulations, and those calculations are on attachment B. The third item for the board's consideration is loss of self-certification penalties. In the event a board makes a material inaccuracy finding, the law also requires the district be prohibited from self-certifying project information on subsequent applications for a period of up to 5 years. The board can make that determination for as long as they want. Staff has developed a framework represented in attachment C, and we're recommending a 5-year loss of self-certification. Statute also requires the board charge the district an amount of $100 per hour for the additional hours needed to process additional information. The district agrees that the enrollment was misreported as described and agrees with the eligibility adjustments needed for the corrected enrollment projections. However, the district disagrees with staff's determination to the extent of the eligibility and funding advantage. The district believes that had it known there was insufficient new construction eligibility to support its original request, it would have modified its pupil grants at the time to other grade categories that had sufficient eligibility. Districts are allowed to use grants from a different grade category than the project, and it's called a use of construction grant. However, staff believes that to accept the district's consideration would be essentially retroactively changing these grants. The district also states they would have sought to reduce the site and design funding apportionment for the Hillcrest High project to cost incurred. That would return 908 pupil grants back to their new construction eligibility, which would nearly eliminate all of their funding advantage. In this proposal, the district isn't actually returning the funds, that they would be entitled to those funds at a later date, is their opinion. The district believes that the net funding advantage is limited to $1,341,140 in excess funding, and this is attributed to the Wells Intermediate Project, which is their last project where they ran out of eligibility to use the grants. Staff has reviewed the district's grant calculations and believes that it is correct using their assumptions. So in summary, the statute requires OPSC to notify the board, which is why we're here, if any certified eligibility or funding application related information is found to have been falsely certified by the district, and statute requires the board to impose penalties if an apportionment of fund release has been made based on that information. Statute does allow the board to determine the additional funding received as a result of the material inaccuracy, including interest. The district states the amount of excess funds received is $1,341,140 plus interest. As I stated before, staff has reviewed those calculations. However, based on statutes and regulations, staff must recommend a board require the district repay $14,124,612 in apportionments that were not substantiated plus interest. Our recommendations are outlined on stamp page 201.
Mr. Hagelin, Mr. Buchanan.
Let me throw out a motion, and then if we don't agree, then we get your testimony, but maybe I'll cut to the chase. I did review this as well. This is a very old case back from '98 and such. I believe there's the $1.3 million plus interest, $1.8 million total, roughly, with the loss of certification, loss of self-reporting, the regular standard things, and I'm comfortable with that.
So that's, in staff, you have that proposal, I think you circulated to board members, so that's the one you're referring to?
Correct, so I moved that.
And with acknowledgement that there is a material inaccuracy involved, okay?
Yeah.
Ms. Buchanan?
And I second that. I think it's a solution that works for all of us. There was only one issue that I think staff brought to my attention late today, and that is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'll speak to the superintendent in ALVORD here, is that there is, that we're looking at making, paying the $1.8 million in 2 payments, correct? And my understanding is there is in statute where there would be an interest on the amount that's delayed, which I think changes the total by, what was it, $2,000?
So we'll make reference to just the appropriate interest and have staff figure it out,
They
but it is.
estimated, but I just want to be sure that, we all, that's right, we all understand that. And I just want to also thank you, and I want to thank staff for OPSC for all the time that you put into this over the last month, coming to a solution that worked for all of us.
And I'll point out that ALVORD did drop this off on yesterday, and I never did get a chance to see it, so I apologize, but I don't really see stuff 24 hours before a hearing. It just doesn't work, since we are involved in a bunch of other stuff. So if in the future you guys want me to see something, you got to give me at least 3 days. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. But thank you, and at their request, they asked that we put this as part of the file. Do you still want it as part of the file, or not anymore? I look to the district.
We do want it as part of the file.
Okay, so without prejudice, without any analysis, it will be incorporated as part of the file. God only knows what it says. Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and all the parties understand it. Any additional comments, questions from the board members? Seeing none. Any comments from the public? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Abstentions? Ayes have it. Thank you. And again, thank you, staff, and thank you, district, for all the work that went into this. Appreciate it. Are those all the action items before I lose senators?
No, we have number 11.
Number 11. Okay. So the execution of the 2013 grant. Barbara.
Thank you. The item before you is the action item on this. Now, when the board adopted the consent calendar a few minutes ago, you did approve the 2013 grant amounts for all projects, beginning with this board and then moving forward for 2013. So you do not need an additional action to take care of the projects moving forward. What this item does is it allows the board to consider whether or not the 2013 grant amount should be applied to any of the projects that are currently on the unfunded approvals list that have received their approval in prior years. And it also provides the option for the board to apply this grant increase amount to the unfunded list for those projects that are beyond bond authority, which started in December of last year. On page 228, there is a chart showing the
I think
different.
Mr. Hagan is prepared to make a motion to status quo.
Yeah, move the table, item 11, no.
Okay. We move to tables, so no action is necessary, and it goes used prospectively. Is there a second?
Clarify to me, we're doing what we've always done in the
Yes.
past, all projects we approve. Yes, that's second.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so all projects approved after this date receive the indice increase?
Funded after this date, right?
Funded.
Including today's items that were on the calendar for unfunded approval, those will be adjusted next month to include the 2013 grant amounts.
Okay.
Okay. We're on the board on that. Any comments, any more initial comments? Questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, just officially, all in favor of tabling, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hagman. And is that it for action items? Okay. We're going to move backwards now to the other stuff. Senator Wyland.
If Mr. Chairman, you don't mind, I am going to have to leave. I'd just like to make a couple of points, which I think I made at some point in the past. One is partly a question of staff. As I recall, proposals, when someone does build something, and hopefully that will happen again more frequently, the Department of Education certifies that there are questions about CTE and CTE facilities. Are you familiar with that?
Thank you, Senator.
I would like to be able to see those and have those be made available to the board. I think that's extremely important. It happened to be my legislation, as I recall, which did that, because even though I think among all members of the legislature there's a big interest in CTE, that last bond had, gosh, I think it was $500 million. Some of that didn't go to what most of us would consider CTE. Quite frankly, it was gamed by some consultants who interpreted CTE in ways that most of us wouldn't, and the students who then didn't have those opportunities lost out. So just number one. And number two, and I realize this is a broader and more challenging subject, I think in some way we need to take a look at costs. And what really drove me to that was the Robert F. Kennedy facility in Los Angeles Unified. Now, I realize they passed the bond, et cetera, but when you have a school, I think it serves at build-out at 4,000 students that cost about over $500 million. Something just isn't right. In my old district, we didn't have very much money and had to be extremely careful with how much we spent, because it's a district that serves a heavy minority population, and we had to make sure we didn't have a lot of money there. So I'd just like to throw that out, that at some point we look at that, because we're about serving students. And I'll never understand why LA Unified didn't figure out a way to serve all those students who had real facilities need, rather than doing that. So thanks, and next time I'll hope to be able to stay longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Then we're going to go back to the financial reports and the status of funds.
Yes, on tab 5. Let's go back to the status of fund release report on page 164. As I shared with you earlier, I was getting to the point that we actually released $26.1 million for the month of December, and reported in the executive officer statement that That was just a finite group that actually did go through before the close of the year, even though we had apportioned projects a few weeks earlier. So we should be seeing more activity as we start to progress through the 90-day round. We actually, on page 166, just highlighting to the board, we do have a bar graph displayed there, and that represents the projects that were apportioned in December. And so we will be monitoring those timelines. As we start to release cash, that bar will start to shrink. And so prospectively, we'll be seeing more activity in that area. And we have nothing to report on the next page as far as projects that didn't perfect. We had a project that did close up in the end of September, and so we had nothing that fell off the list.
Okay.
And the other item is the status of funds in which...
Before you go there, any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, move on, please. Thank you.
So on page 168, we just highlight to the board every month about the number of projects that we do process. We are actually bringing forward about over $171 million in project approvals for Proposition 1D. That represents actually in the new construction arena $11 million for 2 projects. We actually have some other adjustments there, and we have some projects in the high performance area that actually do have approvals for 12. And we actually bringing forward those overcrowded relief grant projects for 22 projects. So that represents $125 million for Proposition 1D, corresponding adjustments related to some rescissions. And in the respective category of Proposition 55, we're processing 12 projects for new construction of $46.3 million. We also have a conversion of a charter project going on in that category as well. So you'll see some debits and credits posting as a result of that preliminary apportionment. There's no activity in Proposition 47 to report. And on the following page, the significant activity we want to share with the board is in the emergency repair program. We actually are processing additional projects. So there are about 4 projects that will actually receive some awards, even though we don't have the current cash for the program.
Okay.
And one more thing in this section, we did provided a display for the board as far as the projects that are beyond.
Silverman, Ms. Moore has a
Yes.
question.
Just on the emergency repair, how is it that we are able to fund, or able to place on the list additional projects?
They were out of rescissions.
So others rescinded, and so
Our
that,
authority has come back to the program.
thank you.
So we're able to move further down on the list. On actual page 177, we have some nice displays there, and the cylinders that we shared last month, we did share that we processed 33 projects that represent $76.8 million. That was exclusively mod projects that are beyond the authority, and they fell within the regulatory timeframes. So this month, we actually bringing forward represents, the blue shaded area is $8.1 million, and that is a new construction project that was fully processed, waiting for bond authority, and $60.5 million in modernization projects, and that's 35 projects. So in total, we've accumulated $145 million in projects that we have processed beyond the bond authority.
Yeah.
And that's what I have in the financials. Not sure if you have any questions.
Any questions or comments? Any comments from the public? Okay, moving on. I think that moves us to tab 12.
Yes. The report section.
Okay.
So since about 2009, we've actually provided the board updates about the program, and we're actually proud about some of the updates we have to share on an annual basis. I know most of our consent items are just real quick vote and we're done, but we actually do process a number of projects, nearly 1,000 projects that were processed in 2012 that represent almost $2 billion in action that we all take, that provides unfunded approvals and cash to districts, and likewise all the work that's shared that we all commit to here at the board. But if you look at the chart here we displayed, in 2012, we actually did process and brought forward to the board 13 appeals. They were actually 7 appeals that actually were administratively resolved, and those actions did go through the board through consent agenda. And there were several other appeals, a few that actually were dispensed as well. some of them administratively resolved, and others are carried over to the subsequent year. But the projects in total, I mean, between the blue and the green shaded area and the red area, and that represents about 98%, almost 99% of the activity required to the board, really go with no challenges. So it's a great track record and a great tribute to what the board's work is doing here today. So wanted to highlight that. The subsequent page is just a synopsis of those activities for the program in the respective categories, be it new construction and modernization. And so that summarizes that activity. And we also have attachments, I'm not going to go in detail, but attachments A, B, C, D, that are reflective of the activity in the unfunded approvals, broken down by county. So we'll give you a summary of that on an annual basis. So again, it's just to acknowledge the report and the work we provided.
Thank you. Mr. Hagman?
I did peruse all the different reports. I know there's a lot of work that goes in there, so I just want to at least acknowledge it, even though we don't necessarily want to go over all those things in detail on the board here. But I think it is important. I actually especially like the different classes we do in our subcommittee. We come up with these new binders with step-by-step. That's been great for me. I would definitely suggest the new members that come on get those so they get up to speed to do it. But I know there's been a lot of work done here. I want to second Senator Wyland's comments that, love to do more schools, with the same amount of money, which we'll have to figure out ways to do that. But at the same time, I know you guys do the sheer volume of work with the least amount of things that actually do come to us. This speaks highly of your group of doing an excellent job of going through. So I just want to give you kudos on that.
Thank you.
I'll second that. Ms. Buchanan?
Actually, I'll third that, because I think that a lot of the information that we're producing for members on the subcommittee is very beneficial for all of us to have a deeper understanding, then be able to discuss the tough issues later for moving forward. So I have a question in terms of the new, you can pass once and not apply, or for funding, and then the second time we take you off the list, which we all agreed to. So that will start with this cycle, right? Correct? I mean, can you, in terms of when?
It will start once the regulations become effective. Once the Office of Administrative Law approves them, then the next priority round cycle will be the first one that districts will have the option to participate. If they don't, then the next cycle they would be required to.
And so when do we anticipate those cycles coming?
It depends. Right now, we
I know
are.
the regs, but I mean, in terms of when is all that going to happen?
Right now, we're well underway in a certification filing period, which ends in February. The next one will be in the middle of the year. But it all depends on whether we can get these regulations approved on an emergency basis, which usually can take between 1 or 2 months. If not, it will take about 5 or 6 months before they become effective, and then the next filing period would be considered the first one.
So can I ask the chair, is there anything we can do to encourage the regulations to be approved on an expedited basis?
OAL is very independent.
They're all, okay.
Yeah, that's.
All right, so writing a letter, do anything like that? Okay.
Yeah, they're.
So if they're approved in the next 2 months and the next round is mid-year, then that round you either participate or you pass. The following round is then when? The first?
January.
January.
2014.
So the earliest, if not, we don't see these going into effect until, or having an impact in terms of returning money for more programs until mid-2014.
It would be, it wouldn't require the action of the board because it would happen automatically. The rescissions would come back to the program. So, yeah, you won't see the impact of 2014.
Administrative law process.
Yeah, I'm not, it just kind of potentially puts a number of projects for those where we know that, they've been on the list and haven't.
Well, we've tried this issue Deadwood since I first got here.
Right, I know.
We finally got it there, but, that was probably my second month on the assignment. It was an issue that we discussed, and it only took us 1.5 years to get there. So.
I know. I mean, I'm just looking at where we are now and comparing it to the financials, and we can't spend money twice, so I can't have Project A on the list and then also give money to Project B, but we're now looking at the earliest we see space opening up. I mean, that doesn't mean projects on the list can't go ahead and apply, but it means the earliest we potentially know that we have more funds available is a year and a half from now. So I just throw that out.
Valid observation.
All right.
Okay. Next item.
Next item is the quarterly reports on the joint use program. The board actually took action, it's actually on tab 13, page 238. The board did move forward with a motion back in June and October in 2012 to approve 4 joint use projects. And just to give you an update, real quick update on page 239, 3 of those projects have actually come in and accessed the funds. There is one project that is still working through the process of moving the project forward. As we speak about the joint use projects, there's a number of different steps that they have to, in order for them to move forward. Once they receive an apportionment, in which they did, the project has 12 months to come in for the necessary approvals, and as I understand, they are working through DSA for a review. But we're checking as far as whether or not they've submitted a review and approval for the Department of Education. So that's the first step, and they have until June 26th of this year to perfect. And if that doesn't happen, then they will lose their project. So we're hoping they move it along, and then once they hit that benchmark, they have 18 months to come in for the cash. So that's what we have to report.
Yes.
Any questions?
All right.
No.
Next.
Next is the tab 14 is the workload for the 90 days. Although that's all conditional, I know we put various dates there, but it's really probably the discussion for your calendar. The next information item is the dates for the SAB.
Okay, thank you. And I know there's folks that want to talk about this particular item. So, as pointed out, this schedule is pending approval of the chair and vice chair. So the vice chair, now that we have one, she and I will have a conversation. But it's the goal of the chair that we do not meet in February, but we meet in March. And if the need arises for us to meet, so the schedule we have is essentially every other month. If the need arises for us to meet in between, I'm all for it. It may be something that we do a consent calendar and just approve something that needs to get approved immediately kind of stuff. But it's not, my goal is not to disadvantage anybody. So I just, I know that it cuts into folks' billable hours, and I apologize for that. But there's a lot of effort that goes into creating these binders, and so I just...
Mr. Chair, I was going to suggest that to do the appeals, to do the reports and all that kind of stuff, I can see that every other month since our workload's going down. I am concerned somewhat of making sure the business that we do still continues on. As far as the legislators go, we're a captive audience. We're here anyway. As far as having a...
Not always, though, because I have a problem getting a quorum.
Right.
Well, I can't speak for the senators. They're on a different universe than the assembly members are anyway. But to come in and do a 5-second consent calendar, I'm all for that. And just putting off the heavier lifting stuff every other month. I just want to make sure that we don't slow down. I mean, as it is, I mean, you just went through how long it's going to take. You have a year to get this stuff approved by state architects, and then 18 months to get started with funding. I mean, in real life, in the real world, you build in a year.
Right.
You don't have to go through all this process. And I know there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of negotiations, especially with the school districts and the state, but I don't want to be part of that slowdown. If
No,
that's what I'm
absolutely
saying.
not.
And if there's any way to make sure that is, this, or even get the authority of the chair and vice chair to say, consent item, boom, let's go, from a written, I'm okay with any kind of system like that, just as long as we don't slow it down.
No, our goal is to, not disadvantage, keep things moving along, and this is a trial. I mean, we're trying to figure out whether or not this works. If it doesn't, if we find that we still have to meet monthly anyway, then this goes away. But it seems to me that there's less workload going on, and there are less issues going on. As we look forward to some of the items, we had a conversation with somebody who's up in the future, and we said, can we put you to this month? And they said, no. Okay, how about March? March works well. Let's do March then. And so we will have those conversations. I know that some of the folks are more sensitive to the timelines are the charter schools. We do not want to disadvantage anybody. We do not want to jeopardize anybody's funding. And so we will not do that as a result of this.
So I'd like to suggest maybe a compromise, because I agree that the likelihood that we're going to need to meet monthly is probably not very great. However, I know that on my calendar, like even though I'm in my last term in the legislature, and I'm not like a freshman that has the third house coming in every 20 or 30 minutes to introduce themselves, I'm not walking out till like 6:30 every night. And so if we suddenly needed a meeting to try and schedule it where all 6 legislators had time open, I think could be challenging. So what I would like to ask is, could we put a date on the calendar every month, have the 2 of us meet based on what we know our workload, and do it far enough in advance so we're not creating unnecessary work for staff. But I'm wondering if it's isn't better having it on the calendar and taking it off than trying to figure out a time when we can all meet when we do have.
So basically, you're holding the calendar for that day.
Yeah, you hold it and then we
release it, and, a
We should
couple
be
weeks
able to do
before,
it
yeah.
well ahead of time so that we're not creating necessary work, but it's always easier to take something off a calendar than to try and find a time we all can meet, and that then hopefully allows not just us, but everyone else to plan their schedules, and for those of you who are advocates out there, you get a free day, or a free afternoon, if we don't have anything.
I would just like to remind the board that for any meeting, we have to comply with the Bagley Clean, which means that we have the 10-day requirement. So
Well, I would hope we would
No, 2 weeks out.
well, 2 or 3 weeks out, but like I said, I just think from a calendar point of view, it's easier to have it on and take it off than to try and.
So we can have the dates on the books, on our calendar, and on our personal calendars. So say for February, if people want to freeze a day, hold that day. And if the need doesn't arise, then you can fill it up
Right.
later, but for now, don't fill it up. I mean, but at this point, we have nothing for February anyway, but if you want to agree to so do that, provide us dates for February and for the other months that we should keep put a hold on those, so that if the need arises, that's the day that everybody agrees to that we will do it. But with 2 weeks in advance, we'll send out a note and say it's not going to happen.
And the tentative date would be February 27th, if that's what
Okay.
going forward.
So next meeting on the books will be the 27th. Hopefully, we will not use it, and we'll move back to March. But keep the 27 in place, and then a couple weeks ahead of that, but I guess one of my main things, though, is I really don't want staff trying to create work to get to that.
I agree.
So I'd rather they deal with the applications, try to resolve issues with schools, be supportive of schools, take care of the issues they need to take care of, rather than to start working up, because putting a binder is time-consuming. Staff has to go do the analysis, the background, the issues, and
Right.
do all that, and I don't want them
If
to...
it's more than 14 days, well, let's meet earlier, but
Okay.
let's take it.
Pull the plug earlier, okay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Ms. Moore, did you have a comment, or?
I just have a comment on, it's tangential to this, and that is we're in the now world of the acknowledgement list, and that acknowledgement list, I would assume, would be built every meeting that we meet. But like today, we did not acknowledge the acknowledgement list. And I would think that if it's going to be an acknowledged list, we probably ought to take an action on it. And I would give that to you as chair and vice chair to consider as we move forward.
I think that's a reasonable request.
And that would build each meeting that we meet.
Okay.
may I say something?
Yes.
I would just like to say that it should be short of an approval. I just want to make sure.
It's just
that they're
sort of
good.
submitted but not
We're
approval. It's
acknowledging
more like
receipt.
the non-action item stuff.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right, we have some folks who want to wish us a Happy New Year. Oh, no, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, Moira Top on behalf of California Charter Schools Association. We're very appreciative of this
Mic
one.
down. There you go.
Sorry about that. Moira Top on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association. Appreciative of, I think, the compromise. We did raise concerns about whether or not this could prejudice projects. And I do want to, we do know of one school that does need to avail itself of a February meeting. Again, I am very sympathetic to the concerns raised and the reasoning behind the proposal, but we do look to February as an important date for a meeting for at least one of our schools that just came out of CSFA approval. So, but we do appreciate, I think, the idea of putting something on the calendar and then removing it if not needed is a wise course, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Buttons. Is there, can you have a heavy meeting and a light meeting? I mean, you don't have to go through all the reports and all the discussion items, stuff like that in every meeting.
We can
unless
streamline that meeting
unless the
and
members
on-
want to go
Yeah,
through it.
absolutely.
So if you did have like the February 27th, it could literally be a consent item, we get a quorum, boom, we're out in 5 minutes.
We have, as a board, in our history, there was a time when the board had what were called consent meetings, and then there were, all-in meetings that inclusive of policy. So that has been done in the past with this body.
And that would say,
Yeah, so it would
hopefully
be
a lot of
that
the
kind of
report stuff.
concept, where we just take care of something that's streamlined, get it done, and be gone, and not take everybody's time.
And maybe between now and February, we can get some feedback from members in terms of, maybe we only need the financial reports quarterly, I don't know, but in terms of how often they feel like they need to see this.
Okay. Mr. Duffy.
Mr. Chairman and members, Tom Duffy for Cash. Just sort of an add-on to your proposal, Ms. Buchanan. You have adroitly led now at least three program review committees, subcommittees, and it appears to me that you have a perfect opportunity to schedule those committees on the date that the board would normally meet. It happens that in February, we have the cash conference. We have historically scheduled the cash conference since 1982, the week that the board meets in February. So we have about 1,500 people that are going to be here for the cash conference. That would be an August time to hold a subcommittee hearing and ask people to tell you what they think of the program. But our overall suggestion really is, and it's a recommendation to you, and I sincerely, we appreciate the work that you do, because this is a part-time job for you that you don't get compensated for. But, but I told that to our group this morning, that if you would consider scheduling those meetings on those days when the board wouldn't necessarily fully meet, but that you could indeed schedule a full meeting for part of that time. It's a time when that is certain on the calendar. It could be known throughout California that the board is going to be having a hearing on that date. And I have to say, Ms. Buchanan, I realize your time is extremely important, and you have been very conscious to make sure that we know you want to hear from us, and we try to encourage our districts to come and speak, and that's going to happen at the next meeting. But if you would consider that as an option for you, because I think it dovetails well with your mission.
Okay, that's more of a subcommittee conversation, not a board conversation.
We can talk about it. It may work. I mean, the problem is if you need a longer meeting and you're not planning on it, and you've got the subcommittee meeting planned on the same day, you potentially have a conflict there. And we can talk about it. But we also do have a schedule that we've put out for those subcommittee meetings.
I recognize
and I have
that,
to compliment the board members, Ms. Moore, Mr. Diaz, Summer Hagman. I mean, everyone's been showing up for those meetings and engaging, and I really appreciate that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
And speaking of that material, if you could please make sure, as we have new board members, that their staff get that material, because it is very, very educational in terms of the program, the process, and so forth. There's clearly a lot of thought that goes into that. So if you could please share that with the new folks, I appreciate that.
And do we provide that to the board members who aren't participating on the subcommittee?
Yes,
Okay,
we
good.
do email those.
Because I know
documents out.
we've given everyone the opportunity to participate, but I
Yes.
just want to be sure they.
It's fantastic material, so thank you. Okay, any other public comments? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.